Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's take up today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 9 important articles for a detailed analysis. Let's cover all these topics comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking our initiatives, do support us with your likes, share the video with other aspirants, and without fail, subscribe to our channel. Now, before we start taking up the discussion, we have a very important announcement. On the 12th of July, the new batch in English has just started for 2025 aspirants. So India's top English educators would be conducting these comprehensive classes, and this would be a comprehensive program for your prelims, mains and the interview. It includes the prelims and mains test series, doubt clearance sessions and even one-on-one mentorship. So if interested, do enroll for the program, and we have an offer going on where the course is available at just 24,999, and this offer ends tomorrow. Tomorrow would be the last date. After that, the prices are increasing by around 10%. So if interested, do enroll for the classroom program. So with this, let's begin with the discussion by looking at this important article on the front page of the Delhi edition. I'm sure all of you would have heard about this development already. Yesterday, there was a global breaking news from the United States. Donald Trump was targeted in an assassination attempt. And fortunately, he managed to survive the assassination attempt. Now, many of you might wonder, how is this topic relevant? There are a couple of issues which could be relevant for our exams. One, the history of political violence, the history of assassinations, particularly in the United States, and has there been any such incidents in India? Next, the issue of proximate security to head of states, head of governments, former head of states and former head of governments. What is the kind of proximate security provided for the Prime Minister in India and other such senior officials and leaders? So that is what we are going to discuss based on this development. The development per se itself is not relevant for us, but these related issues can be very important. See, the United States is not new to such assassination attempts and even a few assassinations where president-elects have been killed by the assassins. The United States has a history of political violence, and this is largely a result of its deeply divided politics, the deep political divisions between the Democrats and the Republicans, and the polarization that does occur in the American society and in general the American voters, how strongly they are divided regarding their political opinion, has often led certain individuals to plan such assassination attempts and target sitting presidents, president-elects and even former presidents. So the US is not new to such incidents of assassinations and political violence. So if you look at the last 150 years, in the early 1800s, there was one such attempt starting from 1835. Of course, I'm not going to go into all the details, that is not relevant for us. But just having that background, just knowing that there is a history of political violence in the US, which includes a series of assassinations and assassination attempts, could be relevant for our exams. According to the US Congressional Research Service, 15 such direct assaults have taken place against sitting American presidents, president-elects and former presidents. Now, this is a matter of great concern. See, the US lectures every country with regard to the importance of democracy, the importance of maintaining political stability. But the US itself is a country, a society which has often suffered from deep political divisions, and the rampant gun culture which has been promoted by various political elements has often led to many such shooting incidents, assassination attempts, and the general political violence that is seen in the United States. In the last few years, the US has even seen a lot of political turmoil, which is often not expected by one of the world's oldest and also the so-called stable democracies in the world. In the previous elections, Donald Trump, who was a presidential candidate, refused to concede defeat. He refused to concede that he had lost to Joe Biden, and in some ways instigated his followers, especially the right-wing extremist followers as well, which even led to an insurrection attempt by some of his radical followers who targeted the US Capitol during the election process. This led to political violence in the country, and it even cast a shadow on American elections and American democracy. Because the hallmark of a democracy is the peaceful transfer of power. But last time, this was indeed brought under threat as a result of Trump's ideology and some of his extremist followers, who even carried out an insurrection where they challenged the authority. They essentially tried to erode the election results itself by carrying out this assault on the US Capitol. So if you look at the history of political violence in the US, there is a rich history over here. As I was mentioning, starting from 1835. This was the first time that an assassin targeted a sitting US president. Then President Andrew Jackson fortunately survived this assassination attempt, but this would mark a series of killings and planned killings against the top leaders of the country. There have been 4 sitting presidents who have been killed in the United States. Now this is indeed very significant, because to have your head of state or head of government assassinated, that is a huge security failure. It's not just about the individual. It's not about the person who was assassinated. It's about the office that they occupy. In a democracy, such critical offices of the head of state and head of government, they are very crucial positions that provide for political stability and continuity. So assassinations on political grounds, right, could lead to instability, chaos, and it could even threaten the very survival of a democratic state. So from the likes of Abraham Lincoln to John F. Kennedy, 4 sitting presidents have been assassinated, and that itself tells a lot about the history of political violence in the United States. There have been many more attempts on many top American presidents, including in the early 1900s, where Franklin Roosevelt and even Theodore Roosevelt were targeted, but fortunately both of them survived these assassination attempts. And in the 1970s, 1960s, there were many such killings as well. For example, JFK, John F. Kennedy's assassination, was one of the major political assassinations of the century. Then civil rights activist and leader Martin Luther King Jr., who fought for black rights, was also assassinated in 1968. Then JFK's brother, Robert Kennedy, who was a presidential candidate, was also killed by an assassin. There were attempts made on the lives of Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and Ronald Reagan as well. In fact, this was the last major assassination attempt in the United States in 1981. So after that, it has to be Donald Trump, who has been a victim of another assassination attempt, and fortunately he survived the assassination attempt. Now looking at such political assassinations in India, even India has a history, and major leaders have been eliminated by assassins. Starting with Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation, in 1948, who was executed by Nathuram Godse, a right-wing extremist, due to ideological differences. Then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, a sitting Prime Minister in 1984, would be assassinated by her own bodyguards, which was a result of the Khalistan movement, which was posing a serious security threat for India. In 1984, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi had ordered Operation Blue Star, a military operation to liberate the sacred Golden Temple in Amritsar, which is a sacred Gurudwara for the Sikh community, where apparently hundreds of Khalistani terrorists were sheltering under Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. So to free the Golden Temple from these terrorists who had accumulated massive quantities of weapons and posing a credible threat to the security of the state, PM Indira Gandhi ordered Operation Blue Star that led to the desecration of the Golden Temple. And as a result, few Khalistani extremists in India and abroad had given a call for the assassination of the Prime Minister, who had taken this decision to launch Operation Blue Star. This again highlights how head of states and head of governments can be very vulnerable to such security threats because of their policies, their decisions, and their ideologies as well. Eventually, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi would be shot down by her own bodyguards. According to various accounts, Indira Gandhi was being provided proximate security by the Delhi police along with a special group which was assisting the Delhi police from the intelligence bureau. In a book written by B. Raman, a former intelligence officer who served research and analysis wing, he writes in this book, The Cowboys of Raw, that R.N. Kao, Ramnath Kao, India's legendary spy master, the founding director of RAW, who was very close to Indira Gandhi and also was Indira Gandhi's security advisor in the 1980s. He would advise Indira Gandhi to take more precautionary measures and even wear a body vest. But unfortunately, on that day, Indira Gandhi would decide not to wear the body vest, and some of the radicalized members of her own proximate security unit would shoot down the Prime Minister, leading to one of the biggest political shocks in India. Later in 1991, her son Rajiv Gandhi, who was the former Prime Minister at that point, who was contesting the 91 elections and was most likely set to win the elections and all set to become the next Prime Minister again, was assassinated by LTTE terrorists. This was a case of suicide bombing. Rajiv Gandhi had worked out the Indo-Sri Lanka Peace Accord of 1987 by bringing the Tamil militants, LTTE, to the negotiating table with the Sri Lankan government. And Rajiv Gandhi had even deployed Indian peacekeeping forces to maintain the ceasefire between the Sri Lankan forces and the LTTE. This had led to a brutal counterinsurgency battle in Sri Lanka where Indian soldiers suffered a severe setback. And LTTE had been responsible for the targeting of Indian soldiers of the IPKF. So Rajiv Gandhi had sworn to wipe out LTTE, which was a security threat not just for Sri Lanka but for India as well. So if voted back to power, the Congress party had promised in its manifesto that Rajiv Gandhi would assist Sri Lanka, provide all military and intelligence support to wipe out the LTTE. So LTTE saw the re-election of Rajiv Gandhi as an existential threat, and its leader, V. Prabhakaran, would execute this plan to assassinate Rajiv Gandhi even before the elections could be concluded. After a few failed attempts, the LTTE suicide bombers succeeded at Sri Perumbudur on the outskirts of Chennai, where Rajiv Gandhi was present for a political rally during the 91 elections. So these assassinations in India, especially that of a sitting Prime Minister, that is Indira Gandhi in 1984, and a former Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in 1991, these were major political and security setbacks for India. Because any such assassination of a head of state or head of government is indeed a massive security and intelligence failure. You might have seen visuals and images from yesterday where the US Secret Service, right? You saw the courageous move of Secret Service agents, how they surrounded Donald Trump, put themselves in the line of fire, and how a sniper from the Secret Service team eventually took out the shooter as well. But despite all the bravery and the courage shown, clearly there was a massive failure on the part of the US Secret Service as they had failed to sanitize the location of the rally. Because that is the essential mandate of any proximate security unit, be it the Secret Service of the United States or be it the SPG of India, the Special Protection Group. These special units are raised for a specific purpose. They have a specific role and mandate, which is to provide proximate security. That is, provide immediate security for top leaders such as head of states and head of governments. So the Secret Service will definitely look into this matter. Were there any breach of protocols and standard procedures? Because usually during such events, a complete sanitization of the venue is done and any vulnerable points are secured. And in this case, it appears that there were few blunders or mistakes that were committed. So now, it's important to understand the role of proximate security detail as far as the Indian context is concerned. In India, the most important position would be that of the Prime Minister, the head of government. Of course, the President, head of state, also is provided with security, but it is handled by the Rashtrapati Bhavan. But the Indian Prime Minister is secured by an elite special unit called the SPG, the Special Protection Group. So let me take you through the history of proximate security for the Indian Prime Minister, how it has evolved, and what is the current role and mandate of the SPG. Because this is part of our syllabus under internal security, under GS paper 3. We have a topic where we are expected to study the role, mandate, and the history of security agencies in India. So prior to 1981, before 1981, proximate security of the Indian Prime Minister was handled by the Delhi police, as I was mentioning. A senior officer of the IPS rank, who would be a DCP in the Delhi police, would head a special unit to provide immediate security to the Prime Minister, especially near the Prime Minister's office, at the residence, and also during the transit and movement of the Prime Minister. And later, a special task force from the Intelligence Bureau would work with the Delhi police, providing key intelligence inputs and playing a role in the planning and implementation of proximate security for the Indian Prime Minister. But this clearly wasn't sufficient. The security gaps were clearly exposed when Indira Gandhi was assassinated by her own bodyguards in 1984. This has to be one of India's biggest security and intelligence failures. Clearly, the background checks had failed, the required SOPs had not been followed, and eventually the country paid a price. Again, as I'm saying, it's not about just about the individual, but it's about the office that the individual is holding. You cannot have a sitting Prime Minister getting assassinated, that too by her own bodyguards, as a result of an extremist terrorist ideology. So this was a huge setback for India. Following this, there were major reforms that were introduced. The Ministry of Home Affairs, which is responsible for internal security, convened a meeting of all the top secretaries. It brought in all the intelligence agencies and security forces, and all the top secretaries. They came out with a proposal to establish a special task force which would provide security to the PM all the time, at least as a temporary measure. So a special unit, which was initially under the IB, was transformed into the STF, the Special Task Force, as Delhi police was seen as inefficient or incapable of dealing with such a critical responsibility. Later, the MHA constituted a committee as well in 1985 under Birbal Nath. Please make a note of this. It could be important for prelims as well, because if you have seen 2024 prelims paper, UPSC has asked 3 prelims questions from internal security. So Birbal Nath committee is one of the important security related committees constituted by the MHA to look into the reforms needed with regard to proximate security to the Prime Minister. So based on recommendations of Birbal Nath committee, the decision was taken by the MHA to raise a special group, to raise a special elite unit that would specialize in the role of proximate security. Instead of relying on these ad hoc units or Delhi police, a dedicated agency was proposed called Special Protection Unit. But later, when it was established through the orders of the president, right, it was rechristened, it was renamed as the SPG, the Special Protection Group. That is how SPG was established following the assassination of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So organizationally and functionally, it is placed under the Cabinet Secretariat. Another important point, a factual point. The SPG functions under the Cabinet Secretariat, which in turn directly reports to the PM and the PMO. The PM and PMO have direct oversight over the Cabinet Secretariat. In fact, even India's external intelligence agency, RAW, functions under the Cabinet Secretariat. So SPG was placed under the Cabinet Secretariat and established in 1985, and it is headed by a senior IPS officer of the rank of IGP who acts as the director of SPG. So today SPG is responsible for proximate security detail for the Prime Minister and the family, the immediate family members as well. But over a period of time, there have been some changes that have occurred. SPG was provided legal backing as well by enacting the SPG Act in 1988. The Parliament enacted the Act to provide a legal status to the SPG. Alright? But however, there was one critical flaw which was not foreseen by India's policymakers. So the SPG, when it was set up in 1985 and until 1991, during these 5 to 6 years, the SPG had only one mandate, which was to protect the current Prime Minister and their immediate family. Former Prime Ministers were not considered for SPG protection. Former Prime Ministers did not have SPG protection, and this was one of the reasons why the LTTE could reach Rajiv Gandhi and carry out the assassination, as Rajiv Gandhi had stepped down and was a former Prime Minister in 1991. This was again a glaring gap in India's security preparedness. It was another massive security and intelligence failure because you cannot have terrorist outfits taking out your sitting prime ministers and former prime ministers. So following Rajiv Gandhi's assassination, the SPG Act was amended. A major reform was again introduced to extend SPG cover for former prime ministers and their immediate family members as well for a period of, at least for a minimum period of 10 years. And after that, the MHA would review, along with other security agencies, they would review the threats present to the former prime ministers because of their decisions, their policies and ideologies. And based on the threat perception, either the security cover would be extended or it could be withdrawn. So this was the arrangement that was put in place after 1991, after Rajiv Gandhi's assassination. But recently, again, some changes have taken place. In 2019, the Modi government pushed the SPG Amendment Bill in the Parliament, which was enacted by Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Through this amendment, SPG coverage has been reduced again, and it even became a source of political controversy. So SPG cover today stands reduced, and it is limited only to the current Prime Minister, the serving PM, their immediate family members, and former PMs and their family members, only up to 5 years after they step down. And there is a condition as well. Immediate family members will be covered within a period of 5 years only if they reside in the official residence that has been allotted to the former Prime Minister. Understood? So this is the restriction that has been brought in. So as of now, SPG protects the current Prime Minister and any immediate family members. Former PMs will be provided security cover, but only up to 5 years, and their immediate family will be covered only if they reside in the official residence with the former PM. These are the new conditions that have been introduced to bring in more efficiency and optimize the operational cost of the SPG. Is that clear? But this led to a political controversy because based on this amendment, the SPG cover for Rajiv Gandhi's family, Rahul Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi, was withdrawn, and they are placed under ZUD plus security category, which is handled by the MHA through Central Paramilitary Forces, through the Central Armed Police Forces. Is that clear? So currently the SPG cover has been reduced. Now, what kind of security detail is extended by the SPG to the Prime Minister, the immediate family, and also to former Prime Ministers? That is what you need to understand. The SPG is responsible for the entire security of the Prime Minister, be it the Prime Minister's office, be it the residence, be it any political rallies or events, and even during transit and travel. If the Prime Minister, let's say, is traveling abroad or traveling across the nation, so day in and day out, the SPG will be responsible to safeguard the Prime Minister and the immediate family members and also former Prime Ministers and their family based on the conditions laid out under the SPG Amendment Act. So you might have seen SPG operatives who are drawn from various services, right? They are drawn from, some of them are drawn from NSG on deputation, some of them from the armed forces, some of them from the IPS, right? So the SPG is a well-equipped, a modern elite force, a well-trained force as well, right? It has procured armored vehicles. It has even procured advanced aircraft with defensive measures on the lines of Air Force One, which is used by the Secret Service to transport the US president, right? So the aircraft which is used is a custom-built Boeing aircraft that India has procured for Prime Minister and as well as for few critical leaders to ensure that the required air security is provided during their transport as well. SPG teams, they have a liaison teams that visit any rally site or event location prior to the event, and they sanitize the entire location. They work with the local police, they work with intelligence bureau as well. So a multi-layered security tier is established. So there is an entire convoy and escort that follows. Immediately, in the immediate vicinity, you have armed operatives and agents guarding the Prime Minister. If there is ever an exchange of fire, the operatives will hold the ground, return the fire, whereas the others will ensure that the PM is safely brought out and they exit the site of the encounter. Plus, there would be all the required support facilities, from jamming equipment to jam any possible IEDs and any remote control detonations, to even an ambulance, right, which will have a team of doctors with the blood group matching that of the Prime Minister to deal with any eventuality. So such extensive measures are taken. You will have specialist sniper teams that provide coverage and ensure that any threats are handled effectively before the threat could emerge. So that is why the shooting that happened yesterday in Pennsylvania, right, is indeed a lapse, a security lapse. There would be a lapse of protocol or procedure. SPG also maintains a set of standard operating procedures in its Blue Book. There is very strict adherence by the SPG to the Blue Book. They don't go outside of the established procedures. Recently, there was one incident in Punjab. Some of you might remember this incident, where the Prime Minister was exposed, where SPG security fell apart during an event in Punjab that raised major security concerns. It was a lapse, as the established procedures had been not followed according to the Blue Book. So you can expect a very simple basic question, maybe a 10-mark question or even a prelims question. Discuss the role and mandate of Special Protection Group. A simple, straightforward question. So you can start with the introduction, explaining why proximate security is so crucial when it comes to head of states and head of governments. You can take the context of the Indian Prime Minister, explain why proximate security is so important, right? You can talk about the brief history as well, where Indian Prime Ministers and former Prime Ministers have been assassinated. Give those examples and how SPG has evolved. Why was it established and how it has evolved? What is its role and mandate? Discuss that in detail, discuss the recent amendment, and finally conclude your answer with a way forward. You can suggest that these incidents that we have seen, for example, the recent incident involving an assassination attempt against Donald Trump, highlights the role of the Secret Service and the importance of proximate security. So there could be lessons that could be drawn by the SPG in India. Any such incidents, they are valuable lessons that need to be learnt by agencies around the world. If there was any lapse on the part of the US Secret Service, that could be a very important lesson for the SPG as well. So that essentially will complete your straightforward answer for this question. Now let's look at another article which is also from Internal Security Today. We have an article related to the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation. This article is talking about the jurisdiction of the CBI, which has always been a point of controversy. So let's understand this topic in detail, because it's another important topic for your prelims and also for your mains under GS paper 3. Now, before I take up this discussion, I want you to remember that today Shyam sir will be taking up a new series on the Unacademy app. A new special class is being launched called Economy for Beginners. Shyam sir will be covering the basics of Indian economy, and the series will start from today, 15th of July at 12 p.m. So do ensure you attend the session at 12 p.m. and the link can be found in the community section of our YouTube page and also on our Telegram channel. Now let's focus on this article related to the CBI and understand its role and jurisdiction. But first, let me give you the context. Why is the CBI in the news? Why has Hindu brought out such a detailed article? See, recently, a legal battle has broken out between the state government of West Bengal and the central government. The West Bengal government has approached the Supreme Court of India questioning the jurisdiction of the CBI. Recently, the centre had issued orders to the CBI to take up a certain investigation within the state of West Bengal. But West Bengal challenged the extension of CBI's jurisdiction by stating that this is a violation of federalism. Under Article 131, the West Bengal state government approached the Supreme Court, as Supreme Court has original jurisdiction to look into such cases involving the centre and the states. The state government argued that it had withdrawn the consent given to CBI. The general consent, which had been given earlier, was withdrawn by the state government, thus restricting CBI's jurisdiction within the state of West Bengal. So West Bengal has approached the Supreme Court asking for relief as to how the center can violate this basic principle and enhance the jurisdiction of the CBI and use the CBI to carry out investigations in West Bengal when the state government has already withdrawn its consent. The Supreme Court has upheld the viability of this case, and it is going to look into this particular case brought up by the government of West Bengal. So during this hearing, the center argued that CBI is an independent agency. The counsel for the central government pointed out that CBI is an independent agency, and if it exercises jurisdiction in West Bengal, then the center said it is not responsible for that. But this argument was dismissed by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court pointed out that right from the establishment of the CBI to all the appointments, including the appointment of the director, to even filing of cases and other administrative matters related to the CBI, everything falls under the executive control of the central government. The center exercises full executive control. So how can such an organization be called independent or autonomous? The Supreme Court has thus dismissed this argument of the center. It has accepted the argument of West Bengal government and it has agreed to look into the case. It has not passed any final ruling as of now. It has just agreed to look into the case brought up by the government of West Bengal. So let's quickly understand what exactly is the CBI. Why was it established? What is its history? What is its role and structure? And let's also understand the controversy surrounding it. Because CBI is one of the most controversial law enforcement agencies in the country. So to begin with, you need to note down that CBI is an elite law enforcement agency of the center, which means it has investigative powers. It can register cases as per the given mandate and jurisdiction. It can take up these cases for investigation and eventually push the cases for prosecution as well. So it will have the powers to arrest the accused, collect all the evidence to build a case against the accused, and file charge sheet to push for prosecution of the accused and secure the punishment for the culprits. So CBI is it's an elite law enforcement agency of India. It specializes in certain types of investigation and it's a law enforcement agency of the center. All right. Now, if you look at its history, right, it actually goes back to the colonial period. Initially, a special police establishment was established during the Second World War by the British government. The British Indian government established the special police establishment within the War and Supply Department because during the World War, a lot of funds and supplies were being moved from ration supplies to clothing material to funds. They were being mobilized for the war efforts. And as a result, a lot of corruption was being reported within the government. Several government officials, particularly in the War and Supply Department, were allegedly leaking out the funds and the material, thus benefiting themselves, leading to massive corruption within the British Indian government. So to check these incidents and to bring more accountability within the War and Supply Department, a special police establishment was set up by the British Indian government. Later, after the Second World War ended, this was transferred to the Home Department to tackle government corruption within the center. In 1946, before India's independence, a law was enacted, the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act. It was enacted in 1946 by the colonial legislature, right? And the colonial government would transfer the special police establishment from the War and Supply Department to the Home Department to tackle government corruption, to keep an eye on government officials and officers and hold them accountable in case of incidents of corruption. So post-independence, India inherited this agency called the Delhi Special Police Establishment. Then finally, in 1963, it was renamed and reconstituted as the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation. Is that clear? So its primary mandate was to check corruption within the central government, to keep a check on official corruption, government corruption within the center. That was the primary mandate. Now, can you tell me which committee played a role in the establishment of the CBI in 1963? Please let me know in the comments. So the government issued a resolution. It brought out a resolution. There was no legal backing that was provided, right? By basing it on the British era law, the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, it was renamed and restructured and established as the CBI through a resolution adopted by the government. And since then, the CBI has become an elite law enforcement investigating agency, and it has also been in the center of controversy. See, initially, CBI was only looking after corruption-related cases within the central government. But gradually, as new age crimes started getting reported, the CBI was handled the responsibility of these crimes and cases as well. Be it any high-profile murders or kidnappings or even rapes, such high-profile criminal cases were also handed over to the CBI because there was no other such elite investigating agency for India. Then as economic offences started breaking out, right, in 1990s, India initiated economic reforms and many scams broke out in the economic sector, from the Harshad Mehta scam to Abdul Karim Telgi scam. So to investigate some of these economic offences, the CBI was given the mandate. Then even to look after certain terrorism cases, including the assassination case of Rajiv Gandhi. Rajiv Gandhi's assassination case and few other terror-related cases in the 90s and early 2000s, they were handed over to the CBI. And also, whenever the state police were seen to be inefficient, whenever a high-profile case occurred in a state, and if the state police were seen as incapable or inefficient, or if they were seen as not neutral in a particular case, some of these highly politicized cases, which were in the eyes of the media and the public, they would be handed over to the CBI by the state government itself. All right. So that is how CBI became essentially a jack of all trades. Instead of developing specialization in one line of investigation, it would place its hand in every different sector, from economic offences to terror cases, high-profile crimes, corruption. So that makes an investigating agency inefficient, right? In today's contemporary world, you can't have the same agency dealing with terrorism, economic crimes, and other new age crimes, and as well as corruption within the government. And eventually, CBI would be largely controlled by the government right from day one. It has no legal backing. It's not accountable to the parliament. It's not answerable directly in the parliament, right? So the government has exercised great degree of control over the CBI. And quite often there has been an allegation that ruling parties have misused the CBI, especially to target the opposition. And it's a very valid concern as well. Is that clear? That's why in a recent case a few years ago, the Supreme Court labeled the CBI as a caged parrot. The Supreme Court compared the CBI with a caged parrot, a parrot which is locked in a cage and sings only according to the tunes of its master. So in this case, essentially it meant CBI is politicized, it's politically controlled by the ruling party, and ruling party is misusing the CBI to target the opposition, especially at the state level, by ordering investigations against opposition leaders. So this is an observation, a critical remark that has stuck with the image of the CBI. Now CBI, even though it developed some of its resources and abilities and capabilities, right, over a period of time its efficiency has been brought under question. It has messed up many cases, many investigations, including the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case. You might remember the Arushi Talwar case, right, where the CBI was also criticized for the poor handling of the investigation. So there have been many incidents where the CBI has not only been inefficient, but apparently its independence, its so-called autonomy has been compromised as a result of the politicization, because the appointment of the director and the top officials is largely a political process determined by the cabinet, the ruling party, and the political appointments has almost entirely compromised the autonomy and independence of the agency. So that is why the Supreme Court called the CBI a caged parrot. Now, if you look at the organization structure, ideally, a law enforcement agency like CBI should have been under the Ministry of Home Affairs. But guess under which department or ministry the CBI functions? It functions under the DOPT, the Department of Personnel and Training, which basically handles your UPSC exams. The DOPT is the HR arm of the government, the recruitment and training arm of the government. So under DOPT, CBI has been placed. Why? Because DOPT reports to the PM. Right? There is a MOS, a Minister of State, who looks after DOPT, but eventually the reporting cabinet minister would be the Prime Minister. So in many ways, the CBI comes under the direct control of the Prime Minister. So this has been one reason why the CBI has been excessively misused for political reasons. It's alleged that the CBI has lost its autonomy, its independence. It's no longer an independent agency. Similar allegations exist today against Enforcement Directorate, the IT department, and other central law enforcement agencies. Right? Now, with regard to consent for investigation, with regard to jurisdiction of CBI, there is a limitation. Let's understand this quickly. See, since CBI has no legal backing, it's not established through a law passed by the Parliament, it relies on the Delhi Special Police Establishment for its power and for its mandate. So the CBI does not have automatic jurisdiction. It has no automatic jurisdiction in the states. Why? It's a conceptual question. Why doesn't the CBI have jurisdiction in the states? Why can't CBI file a case and investigate a case in a particular state? It's because of the federal structure of the Indian Constitution. If you look at the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution, right, various subjects are divided between the union, center, and the concurrent list. If you look at policing and public order, that is essentially law and order, these are state subjects found on the state list of the 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So state governments have the primary jurisdiction with regard to policing and public order. The center cannot override this jurisdiction. Is that clear? So CBI has no automatic jurisdiction. It requires the consent of the states. State governments have to provide consent to the CBI if it has to enjoy jurisdiction within a state. If it has to file a case and investigate a case within a particular state, it has to obtain the consent from the state government. Of course, this does not apply for corruption within the central government. One primary mandate of CBI is to tackle corruption within the center. So as far as tackling corruption, it comes under the superintendence of the Central Vigilance Commission, the CVC. And through the recent Lokpal Act, it has been brought under the Lokpal as far as investigation of corruption cases within the central government is concerned. Now let's say central government employees are corrupt in a particular state. Then CBI can investigate. It does not need consent from the state government. Let's say NIA officials or IT department officials stationed in West Bengal, right? There is a corrupt act which has gone on in one of the central government offices. The CBI can investigate that because this is still within the jurisdiction of the center, even though it's happening in a particular state. But specific cases in a state, maybe a kidnapping, a murder, or an economic offense, right? Or a case of corruption related to the state government. If such specific cases which falls under the jurisdiction of the state police, if that has to be investigated, then CBI can't do that. CBI requires the consent of the state government. And there are two types of consent provided under Section 6 of the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act. You have general consent, which might be given by state governments. When general consent is given, CBI will exercise jurisdiction across all cases. Right? It's a general consent which has been given. There is no time period, no deadline, and it's not for a specific case. So then CBI can exercise jurisdiction in a state and even file cases and investigate them on the orders of the center without waiting for state government's approval. But recently, many states withdrew the general consent that they had granted. Many states had provided general consent previously. But because of rising concerns about the misuse of CBI by the current government, by the Modi government, by the ruling party at the center, there has been strong criticism and questions raised by the opposition ruled states. So that's why in states like Punjab, in Chhattisgarh, West Bengal, Jharkhand, and in many other states which are listed over here, these state governments withdrew general consent in the last few years, which means CBI no longer has automatic jurisdiction in these state governments. Without the approval of the states, it cannot take up the cases for investigation. All right. You also have something called specific consent, which can be given on a case-to-case basis. Let's say a state has not given general consent. Depending on a particular case, specific consent can be given. So there are cases where state governments have handed over certain cases to the CBI. Right? You might have heard that if there is a controversial crime, there is a demand from the media, opposition, and the public to hand over the case to the CBI. So in such cases, the state will provide consent to the CBI, request the CBI to take up that case. It will approach the Home Ministry, request the center, and accordingly it will provide specific consent only to that case. It's not a general consent, it's a specific consent given to investigate a particular case. But general consent provides wide jurisdiction in that particular state, but recently many state governments withdrew the general consent based on allegations that the central government, the ruling party at the center, was misusing the CBI to target the opposition. So since then, the issue of CBI jurisdiction and consent has been a controversial topic, especially between West Bengal and center. Even Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and many other opposition ruled states have had similar concerns. Many of them have withdrawn the general consent. So in a recent case, the center has ordered the CBI to take up a particular case in West Bengal, and West Bengal has approached the Supreme Court objecting to the extension of jurisdiction of the CBI because West Bengal has withdrawn the consent. So now the Supreme Court is going to look into this, and eventually it might pass a ruling. This is a legal battle going on from last 3 to 4 years. The case has been going on from 2021 actually, right? So understanding the controversy surrounding CBI, its history, its jurisdiction is very important both for prelims and mains. You can get a question in GS paper 3 or maybe even in polity, GS paper 2. Critically examine the jurisdiction of CBI and the controversy surrounding it. So I think I've provided you all the points in the right structure as well. You just have to assemble them and build an answer for this question. So let's see how many of you can do this. Please write these answers and post them in the comment section below. Now let's look at another small article on page number 7 that provides some important data regarding the kind of research, scientific research and development that is taking place in our country. It also helps us compare India's R&D efforts with the global leaders like US and China. The Hindu brings out valuable data points on the extent of scientific research and development that is taking place in the country. So I'll show you 2 infographics, 2 charts or tables that provide us this data and information which can be relevant for prelims, and you can use the data in your mains, in your essay paper as well. So essentially, this particular chart that Hindu has brought out on page number 7, it points out the top focus areas of research. It identifies the key domains, the scientific domains, which have been a priority for India. So this includes both research done in the public domain by government institutions and organizations, and it includes research and development taking place in the private sector as well, which is funded by private investments. See, one major challenge India has always faced is with regard to investments in R&D. India does not make sufficient investment in R&D, right? Because this is very evident with regard to the scientific output that the country is generating. This is a very good metric to understand the scientific progress of a country, to understand the extent of innovation that's happening in a country. The number of research papers that are brought out, the number of patents that are held, this provides a very good metric to understand the progress that we are making with regard to research and developments and scientific innovation. So India does fall behind when we compare with US, China and some other developed industrialized economies. So even though India is producing a number of patents, we are at least in the top 5 to top 10 depending on which category you're talking about. One major challenge that we still face is that private investment is very less in R&D. right? Most of the investment happening in R&D is coming from the public sector, from the government. And this is also not sufficient. It's a very small percentage of our overall GDP. We barely spend 1 to 1.5% of our GDP on R&D. Is that clear? This is including government spending and private spending. And majority of investments happening in R&D is coming from the government itself, which means private investors are not putting enough money into research and development in the country. So you can track the progress being made by looking at the number of research papers being published every year, the number of patents being secured by our organizations and researchers. So these charts in today's paper helps us understand the focus areas of scientific research based on the number of research papers that have been published from India. So in the period 2004 to 2023, that is in the last 2 decades, the focus areas for India, where the highest number of research papers have been published by our institutions and researchers, it includes the field of nanofluid, which is a subdomain under nanotechnology, wireless sensor networks, silver nanoparticles, again in the field of nanotechnology, coronavirus with regard to biotechnology, and zinc oxide. These are the 5 specific scientific domains where India has brought out the maximum number of research papers in the last 20 years. Now compare this with US and China. These are the sectors, the domains where the maximum research papers have been published in these 2 countries. US and China hold the maximum number of patents, right? They bring out the maximum number of research papers as well. So in the US, the priority areas were coronavirus, HIV research, parenting, galaxies, and PD1. In China, it was supercapacitors, photocatalysis, deep learning, oxygen reduction, reaction, metal organic frameworks. I know it sounds very factual, a little too scientific as well, but just know the basic domains which are a priority for these 3 countries. This could always help you in a prelims question. You never know, there can be a very specific prelims question based on the research papers brought out by these top 3 countries. Even though India falls behind US and China with regard to scientific research, we still account for one of the top countries as far as patents and research papers are concerned. If you look at the last 4 to 5 years, from 2019 to 2023, these have been the top domains where maximum research papers have been published from India. Coronavirus, obviously due to the pandemic, nanofluid, silver nanoparticles, photocatalysis, and deep learning. Now, I want you to take up an exercise, take up a small assignment. There are few technologies and scientific domains mentioned here which you may not be aware of. For example, what is the application of nanofluid? For example, what is photocatalysis? Right? Etc. So can you read more about these scientific domains, these technologies, and understand their applications? It won't take you more than 20 to 30 minutes to do this. I want all of you to seriously take up this homework and mention the key points in the comments so that it can help other students as well. Read about deep learning. What is deep learning? Just a basic idea, basic understanding. What is photocatalysis? What exactly is a nanofluid? Right? What are the applications of silver nanoparticles? This won't take you more than 20 minutes. Do this basic research, find out the key points, write it down, and mention that in the comments as well. Now, let's quickly head towards the prelim section, take a look at the smaller articles, and wrap up the discussion for today. On page number 10, we have an article referring to the Jagannath Puri temple in Odisha, where the treasury, the Ratna Bandar, where massive quantities of gold, silver, and other precious items are stored in the temple complex, has been reopened after many, many years. Recently, the Jagannath festival was also held. So from art and culture point of view, the Jagannath Puri temple is of great significance. It's one of the most historic temples in India. It's located in coastal Odisha, on the east coast of India, right, in the eastern part of Odisha. That is where you find this legendary temple, Sri Jagannath temple, the Puri temple, right? It is dedicated to Lord Jagannath, a form of Vishnu, according to Hindu mythology. All right, it's one of the most sacred pilgrimage sites. It is part of the Char Dham Yatra. It is part of the Char Dham Yatra. There are 4 sacred pilgrimage sites in Hinduism in India. One is present in Gujarat, one is in Uttarakhand, one is in Tamil Nadu, and one is in Odisha. These 4 pilgrimage sites, they complete the Bada Char Dham. Don't confuse this with Chota Char Dham in Uttarakhand. Within the state of Uttarakhand, there is a Chota Char Dham Yatra covering sacred sites like Badrinath, Kedarnath, etc. Right? Gangotri and Yamunotri. That is Chota Char Dham. But at the national level, if you take Badrinath in Uttarakhand, Dwarka in Gujarat, and Rameshwaram in Tamil Nadu, and Jagannath Puri temple in Odisha, that forms the Bada Char Dham. So these are sacred pilgrimage sites, and if you look at the history of the temple, right, it follows Kalinga style architecture. There are elements of Nagara architecture as well. The style here is Kalinga architecture with elements of Nagara style, and the construction dates back to the Eastern Ganga dynasty. It was built under King Anantavarman Chod Ganga Deva. From 10th century onwards, a lot of renovations and upgrades have been done, and it's one of the oldest sacred temples in the country, and it is known for the Jagannath Yatra, the Rath Yatra which is carried out, the chariot festival, which is quite historic. In fact, your English word, Juggernaut, is derived from this chariot festival. Juggernaut is something that is rolling at a considerable speed which can't be stopped. Unstoppable force which is rolling down. That is a juggernaut, right? That's an English word today. This originated from Lord Jagannath because during the chariot festival, wooden chariots, these are massive wooden chariots that are built that roll down the streets of Puri, which is a important cultural event. These chariots are almost very difficult to stop, right? When they are rolling down the streets, they are so massive and majestic that it's very hard to put these chariots to stop. So that is where the English word juggernaut originates from. So that's what you need to understand, some basic historical and cultural details regarding the Lord Jagannath temple in Puri. Next, on page 12, we have a reference to the Southern Silk Route, which according to me is another interesting topic, relevant for history, relevant for IR as well even today. The article says that the Botanical Survey of India has recently conducted a study of all the flora that is found along the historic Southern Silk Route. So the findings of the report is not so important. Many new species and some important plant species and tree species have been documented along the Southern Silk Route, which provides valuable historic information as well regarding the culture and trade of that era. But more importantly, you should understand what is the Southern Silk Route. Many of you would have heard about the Silk Road or the Silk Route, but what exactly is Southern Silk Route? So that is what we are going to discuss. The Silk Road or the Silk Route is this historic trade route that connected China with South Asia, Central Asia, Eurasia, and Europe and Africa, right? So this is a historic trading route through which Chinese silk was traded. That's why the name the Silk Road or the Silk Route, and later many other precious commodities were traded as well. Whenever you think of the Silk Road, you usually think of this in the Eurasian context, right? You would have heard about the Silk Road passing through Eurasia, covering parts of Central Asia, Afghanistan, linking China with other parts of Asia and Europe and Africa, right? But did you know that there was another section of this trade route that predates the Eurasian Silk Route? Even before the Eurasian Silk Route became popular, there was another historic trading route between the two most ancient civilizations, India and China. Just like China was bringing out precious commodities like silk and others, India was also pioneering as far as global trade was concerned. We had plenty of natural resources, starting from spices to precious commodities and gems and metals. Plus, we were making a lot of goods and handicrafts and products which was being exported from India. So historically, a trade route was established, which we call as the Southern Silk Route. It essentially connected the eastern, northeastern parts of India, especially the Assam region of today, including Sikkim, the rest of Northeast India, was linked with China through today's Myanmar. Via Myanmar, China's Yunnan province, today's Yunnan province, was linked with the Ahom kingdom, with Sikkim and other eastern and northeastern parts of India. This was not just a trade route. It was not just goods and commodities that we traded. We exchanged ideologies as well. Buddhism would travel from India to China. Scholars and leaders would travel through this route as well, establishing a age-old connection between the Indian and Chinese civilizations. The Qing dynasty in China would build close contacts and relations with several empires in India. There was a separate maritime trade route established by the Cholas. The Cholas later would establish a trade relationship with the Song dynasty through the Malacca Strait, through the South China Sea. That was a maritime trade route. Parallelly, much before that, there was a land-based route, the Southern Silk Route, connecting eastern and northeastern parts of India with China through Myanmar and also from across the Himalayas. For example, you have strategic passes in Sikkim like Nathula Pass. Right? Nathula has great cultural and historical significance. It was a point where Indian and Chinese civilizations exchanged goods, technology, and even ideologies. So that is what you need to understand about the Southern Silk Route. Now let's look at another article from the same page that talks about an indigenous tribal tradition, which is of great relevance today in agriculture. In the tribal belt of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and Gujarat, there is a tribal festival which is held, which is basically a seed festival. The tribal communities present at the tri-junction of Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Madhya Pradesh, they celebrate this seed festival to highlight the significance of indigenous variety of seeds, which are crucial for local agriculture. See, today we have largely destroyed agriculture by bringing in foreign variants and hybrid varieties of seeds. But our tribal communities, indigenous communities, they have tremendous traditional knowledge. They know which seed variant, which crop is suited for a certain climatic region. If you look at the indigenous seeds and crops, they are drought resistant, they are climate resilient as well, resilient to climate change. They provide resilience against disasters and extreme weather events. And they also maintain crop diversity, thus helping meet nutritional needs and food security needs. So this is part of indigenous traditional knowledge of the communities present in Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh. They celebrate this festival regularly, right? And this has valuable lessons for modern agriculture. Because today, the introduction of hybrid variety of seeds and foreign variants has completely decimated indigenous seed varieties. So such festivals where indigenous seed varieties are still protected, promoted, and celebrated is going to be very crucial in the coming years, given that extreme weather events and climate change will have a detrimental impact on agriculture. So that is what you learn from this tribal festival, which is held in these parts of India. Next, on the same page, we have another article related to consumer rights and consumer protection. The Department of Consumer Affairs has decided to amend the legal metrology rules of 2011. The legal metrology rules focuses on packaged commodities. See, we all buy a lot of goods and commodities, which are essentially packaged goods and commodities, right? So regarding packaging, the details that should be present on a package, which is sold to a retail customer, there are certain rules laid down by the Department of Consumer Affairs in line with the provision of Consumer Protection Act. This applies for the producer, the manufacturer, the importer of a packaged commodity, the one who is selling it. They have to follow the packaged rule guidelines. Is that clear? It's part of Legal Metrology Rules 2011. Now, Department of Consumer Affairs is looking to amend these rules, especially for bulk packages. See, whenever you buy a packaged item, right? Let's say you go to a superstore a supermarket and you buy some packaged goods and products. What can you see? What details are found in the packaging? You find the brand name, right? The exact factory where this product was manufactured, the manufacturing date. If it's an imported product, the details of the importer, correct? And other important details which are relevant for the consumer, including the best before date or expiry date and nutritional information, etc. All these details are provided on the packaging, right? When it comes to nutritional information, that is under the FSSAI, Food Safety and Food Safety Standards Authority of India. But with regard to other packaging details, it comes under Department of Consumer Affairs. So it was noticed that these details were being published only for small packages. Only small packages which are hardly 1 kilo, 2 kilo, 5 kilos. Only those small packages contain all these details. But bulk packages which weigh more than 25 kilograms, which are sold to retail consumers, they wouldn't contain any of these details. Be it a rice bag or a cement bag, right? Or let's say a certain household product which is used in the kitchen or for cleaning purposes. These bulk packages, sometimes they don't contain some of these details. The manufacturer or the importer, they don't provide or publish those details. This affects consumer rights, consumer awareness. So that is why the government has decided to amend the rules to mandate the sellers, the producers, manufacturers and importers to provide all these packaging details even for bulk packages that are sold to retail consumers. Some exemptions are being provided if the bulk package is for industrial usage. Industries are not retail consumers. If industries are buying bulk packages, those packages need not follow this. Packages related to agriculture, cements, fertilizers, they need not follow the packaging standards. All right? But every other bulk package weighing more than 25 kilograms, if they are being sold to retail consumers, they will have to follow the new rules which are being laid down. Next, on the sports page, we have some major updates. Yesterday was a mega day for sports fans, right? We had two major finals. One was the Wimbledon final. Why am I discussing sports today? Because in recent years, UPSC has asked prelims questions based on sports, right? In the last 2-3 years, we have seen the trend where UPSC surprised everyone by asking 2 to 3 sports questions based on big sporting events. And Wimbledon is as big as it gets. So who won this year's Wimbledon? Alcaraz. The rising tennis star Carlos Alcaraz defeated Novak Djokovic. And it was a fantastic match that was held at Wimbledon yesterday. Next was the Euro final. A nail-biting finish for the Euro. Whoever saw the match yesterday night, Spain defeated England in a tightly fought match in 2-1. 2 goals for Spain, 1 for England, and Spain has won the Euro for the 4th time, which is a record by itself. So just remember the basic facts. That's more than enough. Then finally, the last article on the supplementary page, the Hindu carries this article related to Palimpsest. What is Palimpsest? It's of great historic significance. See, historically, people used to write on parchment paper, especially in European societies, right? In medieval times, in ancient times, writing was largely done on parchments. These parchments were made using the untanned animal skin, especially that of goat. Animal hide would be taken and turned into these parchment papers on which all writing, documentation was done. In India, of course, we had other methods of writing, including leaf or leaf-based parchment papers called talegaris, right? They were widely used in India, but in other civilizations, in societies, parchment paper made with animal skin was widely popular. But this was a precious commodity. It was not widely available. So it was very expensive. It can't be just, written once and thrown around. Reusing the parchment paper thus became very important for medieval societies and pre-medieval societies. On whatever parchment paper they have written, they would erase that and write over that again. because it was hard to find, it was expensive, it was a precious commodity. But today, this is a great piece of historical evidence, archaeological evidence. Why? Because when parchment paper is erased, it's only a partial erasure that happens. And whatever underwriting is present, this provides valuable historical information. Now, let's say a historical event was documented on a piece of parchment paper. Later, it has been erased. Initially, they would use milk and oat barn to wipe out the ink and the text, and they would try to write over it. So this would not completely erase what was written. So there would be an overlap, and whatever old text was present, it would be present below, which would become the underwriting. So imagine if a parchment paper has been overwritten 2-3 times, and if you can study that today and figure out what was written previously. So that will give you valuable historical evidence. It's of great archaeological significance. In fact, there are many such parchment papers that have been discovered, and they are called palimpsests. Is that clear? Later, there was a much effective method of removing the ink that medieval societies developed. They started using pumice stone to rub the parchment paper and remove the ink. So in that case, most of the text was lost, but the medieval, pre-medieval parchment papers where only milk and oat barn were used to remove the ink. Still a lot of writing was left behind, the underwriting, and today researchers can study this. Archaeologists, historians can study this, which can bring out historical evidence into limelight. The same term is used in geography, astronomy, and geology as well. For example, in astronomy, on let's say a planet or on the moon, if multiple craters keep forming over the other, let's say there's an old crater and another crater gets formed, or the crater gets eroded over a period of time. So essentially, it's a form of underwriting. So even in astronomy, the same word palimpsest is used. In geology, let's say there is a geological formation on which a new geological formation takes place. And this keeps happening over millions of years. So such geological sites are also called palimpsests. So the term is used across domains from history to geology to astronomy. It essentially means writing something over which is already there, or placing something which is already over there. So this has a lot of scientific application as far as historical studies and archaeological studies are concerned. On this note, I would like to end the discussion for today. Do join the Telegram channel. We have a quiz on some of these articles which will help you practice for the upcoming prelims. So let's end the session for today. Let's catch up tomorrow at 10 a.m. I hope you guys liked and understood everything. Do comment below, do press the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Let's meet tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day. NCERT books are unavoidable to crack the IAS exam. Not only is the content of these books authentic, but these books also help a civil services aspirant to build conceptual clarity. And most importantly, lots of questions in the civil services examination are directly asked from NCERT books. But the aspirants often find it difficult to cover these books, or worse, they even end up ignoring these books. We at Unacademy IAS English are going to make the reading and understanding of the NCERT books easier. We present NCERT Fundamentals course, a free initiative of Unacademy IAS English. What are the highlights of this program? Comprehensive coverage of the most relevant NCERT books for the civil services exam. Prelims and mains practice questions in each session to test your understanding of the fundamental concepts. This course begins from 12th of July every day at 6 p.m. right here on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to the channel now.